So, you finished your short story. That's great. Many people don't make it this far, and you should be proud. But what do you do now? Do you send it off to a publisher? If you're self-publishing, do you decide that you already... Do you decide to send it... Do you decide to self-publish it on Amazon? You could do those things. But why would you give something that's only half as good as what it could be? Hi, I'm Jim, and this is the first episode of Opinons. This is a show where I give my opinion on certain topics to do with writing and the process, and give you my advice and my opinions. You don't have to listen to it, of course. They are opinions after all. They're not facts in any way, and every writing journey is different. But this is just me offering you my insight. So, a rough draft is very much not what you should send to a publisher, or what you should even publish yourself. It's not necessarily that it's bad. In fact, it's far from that. The fact that you even managed to complete a rough draft in itself is quite an amazing thing. And that's something that you should most definitely be proud of, as a lot of people that say they want to be writers never actually get around to finishing one. But that doesn't mean that it's perfect. In fact, it can be very far from it. I myself can attest to this. As someone who has self-published a rough draft, I can tell you from experience it is a terrible idea, and that you should edit your novel, or novella, or short story to a point where you're 100% happy with it, and are okay with sharing it with the world, or even happy with sharing it with the world. So I'm going to go over now my rules for editing. Give me a second. So I have outlined 7 rules for editing that I believe everyone should do. So basically what I do when I edit is I read through my story as many times as it takes, until I'm completely happy with the story, the characters, the details, etc., etc. But I always go, when I read through it, I always go specific with each time I read it. So the first step you want to do is you want to look at the character details. Are your characters believable? Do they seem normal? Do they seem wooden? Do they seem like they're genuine people? Because obviously, they're not, unless you're writing non-fiction. So you want them to be as believable as possible to get engagement from a reader. And the next thing I look at is world building. Does the world breathe? Is it a real world? Is it a real world that can very easily be imagined? Or is it just something that you just explain haphazardly and expect people to understand what you're talking about? You'd hope that it would be the former. And if it turns out to be the latter, then what you'd do is you would add more descriptors to the world building. You'd give more of an insight into what goes on in that world, how the rules work. Specifically, if you're writing fantasy, you need a magic system, etc., etc. Then I go through story details, like plot holes, etc. Are there a lot of plot holes in your story? If it's a rough draft, likelihood is that there will be at least a few. Even if you think what you've done is absolutely fucking amazing, there will more than likely be some issues with story details. I myself have found many story details whenever I write a rough draft. And the fourth thing is checking descriptions. Are your descriptions good, basically? Do they actually describe your characters, your areas, the feelings and emotions that the characters are going through? Or do you just go, they felt sad? And while it's well and good sometimes to say that they felt sad, it's a lot better to show it than to just tell the reader how a character is feeling. And the next thing I do is read the whole story as if I'm the reader. So this is basically where I read it again, just as a reader. Don't do anything to it, but just read it, and objectively assess, or as objectively as I can. I have bias, I am the writer, there's going to be bias, and you don't really need to worry about that, too much about that. Because also with this stage, when it gets on to after part 7, and you start recycling what you're doing, you can send it to other people in this stage as well, and get their impression, because they will actually read it as a reader, and they will be objective, and they will tell you what they like and what they don't like. And this is one of the most useful things that you can have. And the 7th thing is I repeat steps 1 to 6 until I'm 100% happy with the draft as a whole, and then I rewrite it. Because a rough draft is only mapping out the story details. You need more than just a rough draft. In my opinion anyway, you need at least 2, or in some cases you might even need 10, depending on how difficult and complex the story that you're telling is. So thank you for listening. This was my first episode of Indie Opinions, and I hope you enjoyed.